Hello, everybody. Welcome to our session. Thank you so much for joining us today. I hope you've been having fun in Perugia. Yes? Yes? Woo! Me too. This is actually my first time at this festival and then in Italy, period. So I'm even more excited to be here and especially to be hosting a conversation with these wonderful women. And I have to say that I love that this room is mostly women, but I do see the men here. Thank you for being our allies. We appreciate you. Yes. We all have to represent, right, in order to be inclusive. So thank you to the gents for coming to support us. I'm excited today to have this conversation for a number of reasons, because we're going to be talking about driving change and transformation. We're all change makers in the various organizations that we've worked in. And so I have a couple of questions for my esteemed panelists here, and then we obviously want to take questions from you all as well. So today, I'm joined by Jin Ding, who is CEO of Intium Media, Yukari Kane, who's co-founder and CEO of the Prison Journalism Project, and Aimee Rinehart, Senior Product Manager of AI at the Associated Press. And my name is Niketa Patel, and I oversee leadership programs for the Craig Newmark Graduate School of Journalism at CUNY. I'm also VP of ONA as well, the Online News Association. So we're going to start a little bit with some deeper introductions before we get into questions. But first, we wanted to share a little bit about our identities, since this is an all-female panel. And so I'll start. So I was born in London, but now live in America. I am a mother, so I have a 10-year-old. I am South Asian. I'm a sister, daughter of immigrants. I feel like I'm just a woman of the world, and I feel very blessed to have had an amazing journalism career. And my dean is here from CUNY. I'm very thrilled that she's here, and it's wonderful that all the changes and the amazing things that she's done at our school. And also proud that I have current and former participants of my executive leadership program with me here today too. So I will stop and hand over to Aimee.
Hi everyone, it's nice to be here. How do I self-identify? I'm a twin, first and foremost, with a twin brother who is gay, and I just think that has always helped shape how I view gender, which is kind of neutral. And from the Midwest originally, definitely a New Yorker, firmly Gen Xer, and a student now of Niketa's.
Hi, I'm Yukari. Let's see, I was born in Japan, in Tokyo. I'm Japanese and I'm American. I identify with those separately. I am the oldest of 3 sisters and identify really strongly as a journalist. In fact, I had a moment many years ago, or a few years ago, where I had just written a book and I didn't know what to do. I was starting to teach at universities, and I was like, do I keep teaching? Do I focus on my book? And I really came back to that identity as a journalist. I don't have children, but I'm an aunt, very enthusiastic, involved aunt, and I live in Chicago right now.
Hey everyone, my name is Jin. I am a Chinese journalist currently living in the US for the past 13 years, so I also identify as Asian American. I'm on the Asian American Journalists Association's board as well. I identify, I'm a woman and a non-binary. I actually gender fluid. I use she, they pronoun. And in addition to that, I recently have recognized that I became an in-exile journalist in America.
Wonderful. Thank you, ladies. So let me ask you this. As change makers in the news industry, I would love to hear about some of the sort of interesting moves you've made in your careers and different chapters that you had. And so to kick that off, I'll start by saying 20-something years ago, I was a convergence intern. Do you remember that word, convergence? Where basically it's an early multi-platform reporter. And that launched my career from wanting to be a broadcast reporter and anchor into sort of digital journalism, and I never looked back since. And then in 2010, I was ABC News' first social media editor back in the day, one of very few in the beginning, and then at CNN, I was one of the few product managers in 2013 to also move from the newsroom to product. And those are wonderful experiences and kind of set me on the path towards where I'm at now. So I'd love to hear about some of your first opportunities and roles as well.
I told my parents I wanted to move to New York because of magazines, because I couldn't do it in Indiana. And then when I got there, people were talking about the World Wide Web and the internet, and it paid $10,000 a year more, and I thought, sure, I'll do it. And I always am kind of guided, and which is why my career path is not like, it's a career river, I think as Bridget Thornton says. It's not really a career ladder. So I'm always kind of guided by, oh gosh, like that internal, where I'm surprised and excited. So like the internet, when I first saw it, I was like, this is so cool, it's gonna change everything. And I wasn't sure quite how, and I worked at the New York Times Online. At the time, they didn't know where to put us. We were not even in the same building. When we were, I was on the product team, but it wasn't called product. We were just not journalists, and not editorial, and not technicians. And so, but looking back on it, I was an early product person. I stepped aside from full-time journalism. I had a baby, I had an MFA. It's hard to get back into journalism when you do that. So I worked at Columbia Journalism School's communications department, and I knew I would meet my next boss. And sure enough, Claire Wardle gave a lecture on how you could verify photos. The shark swimming up the highway, you can find out where he came from. And I was like, oh God, I mean, it was that feeling again. And then when I sat down with ChatGPT, it was that same feeling again of like, this changes everything. So I am kind of ruled by that, oh gosh, and then I'm kind of, I have no power over it. I just kind of obey, so.
Yeah. Sorry. I love that, you're drawn to innovation.
Yes.
Yeah.
Turns out.
You know, I once read, they say something like, in your life, you're gonna change your career 3 times. And I remember being young in my 20s and being like, oh, like, I love what I do, I'm never gonna change. And I've realized recently that I've done that because I became a reporter. I was a reporter at Reuters. That's where I got my start. And I was a tech reporter because I became a reporter at a time when like the mobile phone industry didn't exist. And believe it or not, when shortly after Motorola came out with cell phones, nobody wanted the beep because it was too small. And so I was like, oh, you gotta be kidding me. And then I went to the Wall Street Journal, still doing business and technology. I wrote a book. I was covering Apple. I was the last beat reporter covering Apple under Steve Jobs, and then left to write a book. So that was a pivot. And then I started teaching journalism, and so that was, I guess, the second change. And then I started volunteering at St. Quentin State Prison in California when I was living in San Francisco at the time, and that just, it was completely perspective changing. I feel like everything's been organic for me. And so now I run an organization called Prison Journalism Project. We train incarcerated writers to be journalists, and we publish their stories. It started out as a passion project, and I'm doing something that I said just like 4 years ago I would never do, which is to run a business. I mean, it's a nonprofit business, but it's still a business, and here I am running a business. So that's 3, 4 changes.
Yeah, watch the word never, right?
Right, yeah. Watch the word never.
Well, I grew up in a Chinese journalism family, and when I was a kid, I never wanted to study journalism because you don't want to do anything like your parents. Then I went to journalism school somehow because I had bad grades, very bad at math. And my dad said to me, if you become a journalist, and this, coming from Eastern Asian culture, women is never the front line center of promotions. He said, the highest you can go probably is a managing editor. And at the time I was a reporter, and I feel like I'm just a terrible reporter because I'm really not a good reporter. I was so confused, so burnt out, and I said, I can't do this for another 30 years. This is crazy, I'm gonna leave journalism. So I came to the US to study something completely different, management, and sports management, because I was a sports reporter. So I joke every single day that I am on the 13 years journey of leaving journalism somehow. Every step I go further and further into journalism. I guess at some point I just recognize I just love journalism, and I'm still here. I entered nonprofit news right after I graduated from grad school in the US, and somehow at the time, nonprofit news was still pretty new over 10 years ago in the US, and not many people working in this field, certainly not many Chinese, not many Asians. I went through, I never actually did editorial. I did marketing, I did comms. I realized none of those things are me, and then I started doing project inclusion, program work. At some point, I was leading the grants programs at the International Women's Media Foundation. And then at some point, I was like, okay, I have worked for 2 amazing grant-giving organizations in DC, and there just aren't many grant-giving organizations at all. How can I move from here? And there aren't many positions. So I decided I need to learn how to do fundraising. So I went to the Associated Press, and I worked with Aimee as AP's first external hire of fundraising position. So from there, I decided, you know what, I actually want to try to lead my own organization one day, and I need to learn operations. So I came out of AP, went to a nonprofit to do operations, and that means I need to learn how to do union negotiation that I have never done before, and I had to learn how to do HR, how to do finance, sharpening up my finance skill I learned over 10 years ago from that management degree. Last year I decided I'm gonna leave English journalism because I just know that if I don't come back to Chinese journalism, there won't be a Chinese journalism for me to come back to later in my career. So I quit my American English job and returned to my Chinese community. And at Initium, I'm very lucky. I think I now lead the largest and the best independent Chinese publication outside of China.
Nice, thank you. So throughout my career, I have worked in local newspapers, TV stations, then at the network level at ABC News, then cable news at CNN. Then I was at Twitter for 6 years, pre-Elon. I always have to stipulate that it was before Elon did his damage at Twitter. But I have always sort of thrived in organizations where they tell me no. And when I have big ideas and big visions and want to really change things and move a newsroom forward, that somehow gives me a lot more agency to then build relationships with colleagues and sort of create strategies and tactics and then be able to get buy-in and move forward. And so some of that has been met with resistance, right? And many obstacles along the way. And I persisted, right? I was very eager, very keen, tried to do my homework, my research to create business cases and move forward. So I'd love to hear from the 3 of you about different obstacles and challenges that you've faced along the way. Maybe we'll go this way, starting with Jin.
All right. One thing I think I've learned is that you don't have to be in a leadership position to lead change.
Yes.
Because of my visa situation, I stuck at one company for very, very long, and I was not getting promoted. I was not become a manager of anybody. I was managing my program, and at the time, I realized how not diverse our work was, and I really wanted to change that. And I feel this itchiness. I know I need to change it, but I don't know how to do it. So actually, I clearly remember that was my first Asian American Journalists Association's convention. I heard someone, a panelist who actually now become my best friend, Corinne Chen, said to me that you just need to be in front of their face until to the point that when they see your face, they think about, I'm not doing inclusion enough. So I took that back, naively, think that would work. It actually worked, but I just say it was a very painful process. But I did come back and basically shout like DEI from the bottom of my lawn for the entire year in that organization. Interrupted staff meetings requesting information like why, and I was not a manager. But I've been there long enough. I know they're not going to fire me because I hold institutional knowledge that you cannot find on the market. So they eventually changed my title to inclusion manager and allowed me to go to all the conferences to recruit and start a DEI program, started calculating numbers, counting numbers, and that led to my next job. I worked for the International Women's Media Foundation. Because at that point, I learned that enough to know how to do this kind of work. So I would say, you don't have to be a manager to change, to lead change, and you don't have to have a leadership position to lead change.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
I think the biggest obstacle to be really honest, I think it's been myself. It took, we talk about imposter syndrome all the time, and I've carried that a really long time, and I don't think I ever saw myself as somebody who starts an organization, manages an organization. I still, go through that. I have a co-founder, and thank God, because we can kind of talk each other out of it. And it's really, we've had this organization for about 3 years now, and it's really over the last year and a half where I'm realizing that I'm good at this. That I'm strategic, that I can actually not just be, just be on the hamster wheel, but I could help transform the industry into what I think it should be, and make it more inclusive, make it more diverse, actually get the stories. I think a lot of us come into journalism because we want to tell stories that wouldn't otherwise be told, shed light, make change, and that if I don't think that that's happening enough, then I can be a part of that change. And so it's been a journey, it's taken years.
Yeah, I can identify with your own self being sort of the obstacle. I think I do not like structure. I do best with like a blank canvas, and that makes a lot of people uncomfortable. So other people are not comfortable in that space. But I can't walk into a room without thinking, I'd take that wall down and I'd move this over here and I'd paint it this way. I mean, I'm always thinking about how I can make something better. And I think what has taken me most of my career to learn is how important it is to get buy-in, and not just from people at the top, but people who are gonna, if you're building a tool, people who are using the tool. Like tool building starts with them. What do you need so that when I make this for you, you will use it, rather than somebody from the top has said you're gonna start using this tool, because that's just not how we work. And so it's understanding and respecting everybody else's contribution. Not saying stuff like, that's a really crappy website, and somebody's like, thanks, I built it. You know what I mean? It's like, I don't go into a room saying that. I just say, I realize the website looks the way it does because it's serving the needs of internal stakeholders and not external audience. So if we can, invert that, somehow. So just the language, the buy-in, and coalition building is something that has taken me a long time to understand.
Absolutely. So sort of being a change maker has its upsides and downsides. What are some lessons you've learned along the way?
It's exhausting. It is exhausting. You just face the fact that it is exhausting. You need to set the expectation for yourself. It's not gonna be like, you make a big change, then done. It's always evolving, and you're working, at the end of the day, you're not working with, products, you're working with people who are going to use whatever process they use to get to the outcome. And in order to control the outcome, what you actually need to change is the process. And that is something I feel like initially I didn't understand. And now I don't really talk about outcome anymore with my team. I only talk about process, because I think a fair process, a good process, will lead to the outcome we want. And the things people can comprehend are processes. But again, that also means every single day you're facing human problems, personnel problems, and that is not. Sometimes your brain just don't want to think that far, and you need to deal with temper tantrums. You need to deal with blowbacks, and you need to grow very thick skin when there are blowbacks, and just say, I know I'm right. I'm not gonna back down from here. I'll keep trying.
People are so people. They're so human. I just relate to everything that you just said. I think, and what you were saying too, Aimee, just about how, if you want to make change, you need that buy-in. And so, I'm in a position where I created, we started with this idea, we've built it, but we have a team, a small team, but we have a team, and every single one of them needs to believe in where we're going, what we're doing, and how we're doing it, or it's not going to work. And there's so many like small and big moments where you're just like, this is my organization, like this is how it's going to be, and then you have to kind of stop and say, okay, so now how do I get everybody to around to that? And then I think burnout is real. This is my first. It's my first time being here at this conference. I love it. And at the same time, I have been, working from 8:30 until 1:30 a.m. every single night because, when I end the day here, I finish the U.S. day. And there's a lot of, especially when you're still small, you're a nonprofit, there's just a lot of work that somebody's got to do. And, you're the one that has to do it because you care the most.
The thing that I keep thinking in my head is don't quit. Don't quit. It would feel so good to go in there and be like, I'm out of here, because it just seems sometimes impossible to make a change. And I always think of that there's a third way. There's the way I want to do it, there's the way somebody else wants to do it, and then somewhere in between is like the perfect way. And actually, my ideas are rough around the edges, and other people's input can really help, but it's important to not react. I'm trying to tell myself that too. Don't overreact, and don't believe your first instinct on that, because quitting sure feels easy, but there's a lesson in that process, I think, that you'll miss if you just abandon what you want to see change.
Yeah, that resonates with me a lot because I have changed my job a lot. If you look at my LinkedIn, it's a bit dizzying. Every couple of years, I have changed my job for various reasons, whether it's location, obviously title, salary. But in the last few chapters, it's been more intentional about the skills I want to grow and what I want to learn. So when I left Twitter, I went to the 19th and wanted to work at a newsroom that had such a crystal clear mission and focus. And for the first time then, I'd been in this industry for 19 years, I had work-life balance too. Like that newsroom doesn't publish outside of business hours unless there's breaking news for them, which is something to do with like Roe v. Wade or policies that impact the LGBTQ+ community. That was so refreshing, like an instant change. My son realized one day, my first week, I closed my laptop and we had dinner and I didn't even have the phone there. And he's like, Mommy, you're not looking at Slack? You're not looking at Twitter? It was like this life-changing moment for me. And I think something else that I've learned along the way is the art of managing up, managing across, and managing down. Like that those are three different separate skill sets. And I wish that somehow earlier in my career, I was able to kind of do that, but now I feel like I finally mastered that, but it's taken 21 years in journalism. You're gonna say?
For what, the like changing things or like career changes? Mm-hmm. Well, I had a career change kind of forced on me. I was working for a small nonprofit. We were working on mis and disinformation, and that leaves many teams wrecked, and ours was particularly wrecked. And I didn't know what to do. Like it was, it had spiraled out, and I knew that the operation was closing, and there were accusations made about management, and I was part of that management, and so. It's like anything, through my divorce as well. It was like, what did I bring to this? What was my contribution? What were my real contributions to this? And like a reporter, I went down every single line and was like, is that true? Which part of that's true? What do I own? How can I change that and be different? And I went through a period of grief, the kind that you're doubled over and you cannot eat for weeks. Like it was a grieving process. I had built this team. We were doing really good work, and yet we weren't going to survive. And I just thought, don't be bitter. Don't be bitter. Learn from this and do better next time, you know, and that's what I've tried to do. It's a very orienting thing for me now, to where they're like, who do I let into my life? What kind of job and work do I want to do, and how do I want to be seen and be felt as a manager or something? So, you know, it was probably one of the worst experiences I've ever gone through, but what a difference 3 years makes, what a difference purpose makes. And, you know, when I got this job at AP, I just put my head down and I worked and I worked and I worked. And that's, to me, has been a real salvation through a lot of this, is just, I'm gonna rewrite my own record and do the best work that I can. I didn't know anything about AI. Somebody asked me, we were talking about a different job, and she said, well, do you know Python? And I was like, well, when do you need me to know Python by? So I'm not afraid to like jump into a space that I don't know, and you too can learn Python in a weekend.
Yeah, I doubt. Yeah.
I don't know about that one.
It's like knitting.
Yeah.
Also
you know,
something I don't know how to do.
Although you know, I learned how to fly a plane because somebody bet me that you could learn in a week, and it took more than a week, let's just say. But I did get my license. Oh. I started my career at these big legacy corporate newsrooms, Reuters, Wall Street Journal. There was a kind of like a ladder that you climb, and I always saw myself as part of that ladder because I'm also Japanese, and the Japanese have very traditional, you know, ways of thinking about careers, and so, you know, I really struggled at a certain point, because I think that in some legacy newsrooms, maybe many, if you want to do journalism and you don't want to be an editor or you don't want to manage, like there's nowhere you can go. Like, I know reporters who've been there for decades doing the same thing that they were doing essentially. And I really struggled to know where I was going to go next, and especially after I wrote my book. You know, teaching, I love teaching, but it didn't feel quite right for me. And so, you know, again, it's been a revelation to know that, like, you could create your own job. So, yeah, I mean, that was a big part of the transformation.
Yeah, absolutely. Jin?
I would say what I learned is that there are changes when you're managing it. You need to go fast, and sometimes you really need to go slow, and especially if you're dealing with, you know, a bigger organization, especially if you're dealing with people who are completely different culture with you. As right now, I mean, I'm a Chinese, but as I re-enter Chinese journalism, I'm more American than anybody in that room. So I learned that I actually need to, in order to change the newsroom culture to the way that I want it to be, that this is a new culture for all of them, because they've never experienced that in Chinese journalism, right? And in order to get there, we're not doing it tomorrow. We're taking very, very tiny steps. And it's funny because all the people who talk with me about, like, oh, I see your publication should do this, this, this. Don't you think I know that? We can't just, the ship has been sailing for 80 years. I can't just be like, tomorrow, we're not going to reach west, we go east tomorrow. Like, that is not gonna work. My team is gonna collapse if we do that. So, like, I feel like at this stage of my career, I learned a lot from my prior jobs, that I know that some certain things just needs to go very, very slow. And it is so hard to go slow. Yes. You have to hold yourself back, and the people under you panic for various reasons. Some people think this is too fast, I can't accept it. Some people were like, why can't those people just understand what I'm trying to say? And I received a long call and text messages from one of our product director, like during this festival, actually at lunch. I was waiting for lunch, I was taking the call, and then I got these long messages. I just wrote 2 words back to her. I said, don't panic. And then I just let it sit for a night. Tomorrow we talk about it again, because I cannot be so reactive to everything, because that's gonna overwhelm me, that's gonna overwhelm my team. I can't just tell them all the things I'm thinking. I've been thinking about like where are we going to be in 5 years, right? But if I tell them where we need to be in 5 years, they will be like, what? I just need to really put my head down thinking what we need to do today, tomorrow, and next month. So eventually, maybe I've been here for 6 months, and I think my team have made very good progress in this. And it's going to be a slow journey for 2-3 years until we get to a better spot. But I've learned my hard lesson to not turn around and say we race to that direction tomorrow. But there are also places that you do need to go very fast. You do need to decide very fast. And you do need to like be seen by the entire organization and the community that you are taking an action very fast. I don't know how to teach that. I actually think that does come from experience. But you don't have to self-experience it. You can look at other people's experience to figure this out. So that's kind of the lessons I learned.
Yeah, and I feel that so much, that in that moment, like when you, like I have a temper, and so when things don't go my way or I disagree, you know, I will lose my temper very quickly. And before the pandemic, you know, being in offices and stuff, you know, you could easily go and get coffee with a coworker and go vent, right? Go take a walk, whatever it might be. But I work from home now, and so sometimes it's just me, myself, and I, and then, you know, colleagues on Zoom and Slack and whatnot. And that's been a lesson for me of like, you don't need to respond to something right away, the Slack, unless it's urgent. But the Slack message can wait, the email can wait, calm down, take stock of things, and then come back to make a calmer, you know, have a calmer response and think through solutions, you know, versus just firing off an angry response. It just doesn't help, you know, anyone. And as a leader, that's been a very stabilizing tactic, not only for me, but for my teams as well. Because, you know, I'm sure we can all relate to like having leaders that just put us in a tailspin, right? And it's so jarring when it's like, everything's on fire and everything's an emergency. And, you know, sometimes that's obviously true. We do work in the news industry, but with strategic plans and operations and projects, not everything needs to be urgent, and you don't need to drop everything for this one tiny problem that can easily be solved when everyone is calm.
It's so hard, and I think as a journalist, because you know, as a reporter, you do work fast. Like you're crashing out stories all the time, and you're trying to break stories, and you're trying to, you know, beat the competition. And that's, I mean, I'm still learning that lesson of having to slow down. And then the other thing is that, you know, shortly after we founded this organization, my co-founder, you know, I run this organization full time, and she teaches at a university and works part time. And she said, you know, like, you don't trust anybody. You don't trust anybody but yourself. And she was right, because like I was great at breaking stories. I was a really good reporter, and what made me a good reporter is that I never trusted anything. So, you know, you just double check, triple check. If somebody tells you something, you nail it down. And so, you know, I didn't get stories wrong for a reason, and now I'm having to unlearn so much of that, because you do have to trust when you're a manager.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, and learning these new behaviors has really helped me with burnout, like reducing that, because the frustration and the anger just keeps building, right? And you feel like you're even more burnt out. So Jin, you touched on something a little bit earlier that also resonated with me. Sort of throughout different chapters of my career, people, even if I have not been a leader, people have come to me as a leader, right? And I've had to find ways of having agency and finding power and building influence internally, and even doing that externally as a way of showing my company my value, right? Like oftentimes they're like, oh, you're on the board of O&A, you do all these things. Oh, you actually are valuable. And that has been very tough to navigate sometimes when your own bosses and leaders don't necessarily have respect and see the value in you. And I think we touched on that a little bit in our pre-chat as well. So I don't know if any of you want to share some of that, if you can relate to some of that, but that's definitely something I have felt in my career.
I think, never underestimate the value of external pressure. If they aren't going to listen internally, And I experienced this, a very felt sense of this. I came back to work after Christmas a year ago in January and was just like, we have to do something about ChatGPT. I mean, this is going to blow everything, the roof off and everything. And Lisa Gibbs, who was my boss at the time, said, we'll do a webinar. And I was like, great. And usually for our webinars, we have 100, 200 people sign up. It was great. 2,500 people signed up for this webinar. And suddenly I had 3 senior vice presidents at my doorstep saying, could we talk a little bit about this AI stuff? And it was like, yeah, we can. So it was amazing to me how it put that in focus for the organization, I think. I mean, maybe it was on their radar before, but like it was really undeniable that that the industry had big questions, and that maybe AP could be the conduit to solve those questions. And I was really proud of that. But somebody had told another woman from Gannett said, the value of external pressure. I was like, that's exactly what it is, and it's incredible, and it can move. And maybe move projects along, or at least your value or credibility within the company along.
I mean, I'm in a little bit of a different situation because I have my own organization, which gives me a lot of control. But 3 years ago, this was an idea, this was a passion project, it wasn't an organization, and we've had to build everything from scratch. So, like, if you pan out to the industry, like, we had to prove ourselves and we had to make a place for ourselves. And I think one of the realizations I had is that, as journalists, we have all the tools. Like, we know how to source, which means we know how to network, we know how to get things, we know how to track down information, and build stories from scratch. Like, we're doing that every single day, and also tell stories. So, like, telling stories about your organization. And so, that's, in addition to the external pressure, I mean, I would just say, like, dig into your journalism tools. Like, if you've got an idea, you have the components. Also, this is an industry where there's so much support. I mean, there's the CUNY program, which is amazing. It's globally, you can apply globally. We have a great international cohort that we can learn from. Also, Alex Papacristo is sitting right there. He is the executive director of the Vance Center, and he's got a fabulous organization called Lawyers for Reporters. And so, like, Alex was one of our first supporters, and it's been really reassuring. As you can imagine, when you're trying to teach people in prison journalism, a lot of issues come up, and he's been a real support, providing legal services and helping us get the right legal counsel. And so journalism is an industry where there's so much support if you want to build a new thing and make change.
Yeah, I would say, I always had some side gigs going on, wear multiple hats outside of work, because our work often sucks. It's like, it's the same thing as dating, right? If you're in a toxic relationship or something, and then like you double down on this guy, it's just not gonna work. You need to look elsewhere and show your value and make yourself feel good about it, right? So I often see that as kind of my relationship with work. Work is always hard, and I'm always facing a lot of challenges. But I try to not, pound on the same thing over and over again. I give it a little bit of space. Again, go back to the slowness, right? Like I raise an issue, and I know they're not gonna hear me, but I can't be the one that yelling this issue every single day. I give it a little bit of space. I do something else outside of work and make me feel like I am growing my skills on this issue, and I come back to work and now I have a new perspective, new angle. My outside work friends who are also journalists help me think through strategies they use in other newsrooms, and they talk with me about, maybe you should try this angle, and maybe try this project. And I look at what other people are doing, and I come back and says, maybe you should try this again and again and again. And so it doesn't feel you're hanging there just by yourself, because being a change maker is very lonely, to be honest. Yes. It's a very, very lonely thing. You have this vision, people just don't see your vision. And that is very often the truth. And in the past, I always thought, once I get to the top of the chain, I will, the sky will be bluer at least, right? That's not the case. I think the higher I go, I feel the lonelier it becomes, because you become the only person who withhold all this information, and you're the one processing it, and other people only see very, very small, tiny part of the pie. And so I try to like not just double down on this. I actually look outside and then come back. Last year I thought about leaving journalism, and I know this is like, last year I seriously thought about leaving journalism. And eventually I left English journalism, right? Because I know that I probably wouldn't make as much impact inside of English journalism compared to putting myself out there in Chinese. And in that journey, I was doing CUNY's capstone project, and in the middle of it, I decided to completely switch topic. I'm changing my topic to Chinese, serving Chinese diaspora audience. And in that process, I started interviewing different newsrooms and understand different organizations, trying to figure out if I enter Chinese is the best way to do it. And I now am the CEO of my Case A newsroom. So I really think all the psychics helped me to become a leader. I was not a manager, but I was already a board member at Asian American Journalists Association, and I already managed like huge conferences. That helped me build my leadership skills, that helped me understand different personnels. So I generally just believe you can't just do only one thing. You should try different things.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's only smart to have a body of work. Your job is a job, and obviously our jobs can be very time-consuming and whatnot, but I do consulting on the side, I teach workshops, I do coaching on the side. I was actually a coach for my program before I even got the role, and that's how that happened. And so I think it's always good if you have the bandwidth to have side hustles and always be networking, because that's how you can also keep driving change and transformation and having different chapters in your career as well. So we have about 10 minutes left, so I'd love to take some questions from you all. So I think we have our friend over here, the microphone, so please raise your hand if you have a question. I see Versha over there. Yep.
Hi, thank you for this panel. It's so great. My question is it's a follow-up for Jin, but also if any of you want to answer this, please do. You mentioned when you get to the top or when you break through with the change that you're trying to implement, you might think the skies are bluer, but they're not necessarily. So what is it that keeps you going in those challenges, in those challenging times, and what makes it worth it to you to keep going?
I think at the end of the day is I know I am responsible for my community, and I know I am so rare at my position. I'm the first Chinese national citizen, got to executive position in American journalism, and I think I'm still the only one. I started it's not an organization, I started a little group, a Slack group called Chinese Storytellers in 2019 with other 10 journalists. At the time, this is a tiny story, at the time I thought I just want to push more Chinese journalists into mainstream media, because that's the only way we can change how we cover China. And we were very successful, and then the government started harassing us online. So we stopped doing that. But in my brain, I still think there must be things we could do for the community, even though we couldn't have a public profile. And I took an executive position because I believed, not because I want to climb higher or have better salary or those things. Actually, I just want to prove to my community that we can shatter that glass ceiling. And I've done that, and then I now think I'm taking another brave step, and I hope my career shows every Chinese journalist, no matter if you're doing other language or in Chinese, at the end of the day, come back to your community, because this country and this world deserve better Chinese journalism. And I think that kept me going. I'm getting a little bit emotional when I say it, but
I love it.
At the end of the day, I think I love journalism. I do believe journalism can change the world, especially can change my country.
Thank you.
I love that. Thank you, Jin. Yeah, over there.
Hi, thanks. I'm Marcela Kunova. I'm the editor at journalism.co.uk. I have kind of 1.5 question for you. So there are still too few women in media leadership, even fewer women in media ownership. Do you have any tips on how to change that?
Could do my program.
Yeah.
Sorry, shameless plug, but my...
Start your own organization, right?
Other tips. I mean, I think find your support group of other women and make sure, even have allies, you know, across the industry where you can sort of like lean on each other for support and inspiration and sort of point each other in the right direction and give guidance and share a lot. A lot of people, you know, I send people jobs all the time. I just saw this and I thought of you, right? And people like Aimee sometimes, I'm not qualified for that. And I'm like, Aimee, you are more than qualified, stop it, you know? Like having that kind of, those voices of encouragement and friendship and kinship is so valuable. So I think that's just one response. I don't know if you want to add to that, but.
I mean, you know, I guess I have to say this, you know, start your own organization, start your own thing.
Do the thing.
And yeah, and actually, I mean, don't even think about it as big of a deal as starting an organization, just do it. You know, we started in the pandemic and we just saw everybody was talking about this as a historic, you know, as the pandemic as the historical moment. And my co-founder and I were teaching inside prison, so all of a sudden we weren't hearing from our students at all. We didn't know what was happening. We knew some of the worst outbreaks in the US were happening inside prisons, and we wanted to know what was going on. We also thought it was important that their voices be part of the historical record. And so we started a publication on Medium under our names and just, you know, put word out that we were collecting stories. They started coming in. George Floyd was murdered 2 months later, and the stories just changed. We didn't even have to ask. They just started changing. And we outgrew Medium in a couple months. We moved it to Squarespace, which usually they use for, you know, commercial purposes. We outgrew that essentially as soon as the website was built because, you know, by summer, we just realized that there was so much here, and we found something, you know, we just found this treasure trove of stories if we could train them to be journalists first. And so, you know, we were in this prime position where we both had journalism teaching experience, and we were both journalists of, you know, more than 15 years at the time, and it just all came together. And it's still unbelievable for us that people are like, oh, we love PJP. It's like, how could you possibly know about it? And but it started with an idea, and it started with as a side project. And so if you have an idea that you're passionate about, start it. Like Medium is available for you. I mean, in that sense, I mean, there's a lot of problems with digital, with the internet, but you can start something, and there are ways you can get that word out, whether it's Substack or whether it's you know, Medium, and you just never know. Like serendipity, you know, you might find supporters to grow your thing.
Yeah.
There's also, you know, the AP now has led the top 3 positions are women, and the top position is a woman of color and not a U.S. citizen. It's like, woo! And the amount of changes that are happening, I don't think it's a coincidence. Women can hold lots of different things all at once. They can all be true, and and we're also in a stronger financial footing than we had been in previous decades. So we're at a position to really change things, and it's just nice to work with leaders who have a vision and give all of us hope that, you know, maybe we too can ascend to that spot.
Yeah, I think it's also a question of just being bold and taking risks, right? Sometimes we're often too scared and we sort of are in our head about things and just don't feel confident. We talked about imposter syndrome earlier, right? Like we sort of need to get out of our own heads and try something, experiment. Because if you don't and you have regrets, right? Like I'm now divorced, and so I'm in a very like YOLO phase of life, both personally and professionally, and that's actually quite empowering. Like I can make choices and I can make decisions, and if I don't like something or something didn't work, that's okay, because I learned from that, you know, and that can then help me iterate on things as well. So I guess maybe one more question. Oh, sorry, did you want to
quickly answer? Yeah. I think women are made to be leaders. We are so good at just multitasking, managing the family and everything, right? Like, and I think we just need to make a promise to each other and to ourselves that wherever I get to, I will pull other people up. That's the promise I made to my community. I think we need to do that Everyone in this room needs to do that.
Wonderful, thank you. All right, one more question, I think, and then we wrap up.
Finish.
That's it? Okay.
Great.
All right, well, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah.